Once I was up in the sky, I had this experience of putting my foot on the yoke of the airplane and feeling what it was like to fly that plane. And I was like, I want to do whatever it takes to become a pilot, to overcome my fear and my discomfort around flying, to show the world that that disability doesn't mean inability, to show the world that you can overcome your fears to do things that you would never imagine for yourself.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the We're Not Stumped podcast. I'm your host, Mike Bolland, and today I welcome Jessica Cox. Now, Jessica really doesn't need an introduction, but I'm going to tell you a few of the things that she's accomplished in her life. She's a pilot. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Arizona, 2 black belts in Taekwondo. She's an accomplished speaker, and certainly a lot more that we're going to get into on today's episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. But first of all, Jessica, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Stumped podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, we're going to have fun. I'm so excited to learn more about you. Like I always said, you're one of my aspirational people to have on the podcast. I told you that, and I mean it. But we always start the podcast with a segment I call In Your Own Words. So even though I know you're very well known, I'd love to hear your story and how you tell it, and a little bit more about you.
It's always weird telling people about myself because it's just, I don't know. I don't normally do that, but I am I am who I am. I was born without both my arms since day one. That's been my reality, and it never really affected me in a negative way other than in the beginning a couple years it was hard to really understand why it is that I was different and how and where was my place in the world. But I had a wonderful foundation. I had a wonderful parents who helped me to believe that anything's possible. They gave me every opportunity you could imagine. Every day after school, I had some new activity, whether it was Girl Scouts, dance lessons, martial arts, everything you can think of. So I felt like I had every opportunity. And I am now today a world-renowned speaker. I've spoken in 29 countries around the world, and it's been a wonderful blessing to be able to use my story to help lift people up.
And you can be found on jessicacox.com if anyone wants to get you to their facility, which I highly recommend because your story is just fantastic. I want to kind of go in chronological order here because we have some shared experiences, and certainly one of them is one thing I don't know is when you were born, whether there were ultrasounds available and whether your parents knew that you were going to be born the way you were. Was there ultrasounds then?
No, there was no actually indication that I was gonna be born without arms. The ultrasounds did exist, the sonograms is how
Okay.
my mom refers to them as, and she had a few of them, and they came back all just, perfectly normal baby, nothing to be worried about, but of course, they were not as, precise as they are today,
Yeah.
so they missed a few things, but I even see pictures of my, sonogram that my mom had before having me, and they looked like any other baby because they were not very clear. So while the technology was there, it just did not pick up on the fact that the arms never developed.
What was it like for your parents? Did they ever discuss with you what their reactions were very early on?
It was very hard for my parents. I mean, if anything, it may have been the hardest moment of their life to know, for one, my mom really reflected over her months of pregnancy what could have happened that maybe she was exposed to or something that could have caused this birth defect. But she had, obviously she couldn't there's no point living in the past. She had to move forward. It took her some time to pull herself out of the depression and the guilt of any newborn mother who has a child with different, different special needs. And so she was very, devastated and didn't know what kind of future was in store for me. My father was a little bit more positive about the whole situation. He was really, a man of faith, and both parents are of faith, but he really kind of was the rock, and he said, "We're gonna get through this," and was very encouraging. He never cried. It was my mother who was really emotional about it, like any mother would be. But my father was kinda like the rock in the situation.
What turned around for her? Because I know that if you go to jessicacox.com, there's a great picture of her holding you, and you're both all smiles. I love that picture. What was the turning point for her? Because she seems like she was also very inspirational in your life as things progressed.
I think for her, the turning point, I know this sounds very different because it's actually the very thing that I resented, and that was prosthetic limbs. For her, the moment she heard about prosthetic limbs, it was like this hope that I could then live a normal life. And the first time she saw me carrying a baby doll with a prosthetic limb, she just really was hopeful for my future.
I want to talk about the your prosthetic journey, but the next thing I want to do, like in chronological order, I believe, would be your first day of kindergarten. Like, how was that for you, if you can remember back that far? Because you're going in obviously a lot different than others. Was it easy? Was it hard? Was it just another day?
Well, my mom and dad were both very protective of me, my mom especially. I mean, I remember feeling a little scared about kindergarten and being so coddled because my mom was just so protective of me. I mean, she even had me a backpack that had crisscross backpack straps because she was afraid that the standard backpack would fall off my back and my shoulders because I don't have the arms to hold them on. So, she got this backpack, and there's this picture I still remember of me wearing a backpack with basically cross straps to ensure that it stayed on me. And it's just like everything was going to be a new challenge for the teachers. I went to a public school in a small town, and I had a wonderful kindergarten teacher and wonderful preschool teachers. But the kindergarten teacher had to do a lot of things differently to make sure that I was included. I sat on the desk at school instead of in the chairs because when you're using your legs and feet at the age of 5 and 6, it's easier to be sitting on the same surface that you're riding on. So I sat on the tables. A lot of things in the classroom had to be adjusted so that I would feel included.
And how was it with your fellow classmates? How was that, your peers?
Well, my classmates were very like most children, they're very accepting and very unconditionally loving and that's how my classmates, I still remember them just really welcoming me, not really giving me a hard time. It was actually more of the classmates outside of my own classes that I think those outside classmates at times were curious, and the curiosity led to sometimes them being saying things or not being so nice and occasionally being mean. But within my classroom, I was accepted and loved as a classmate.
What was it like though when people would come up and possibly say something mean? How did you get through that?
It was hard to be so different. And I remember going home to my mom and saying to her, "Mom, um, they're saying this or that," and she said, "Just ignore them." She'd always tell me, "Ignore them," but it's kinda hard to fully ignore, kids around you, so I ended up developing a very thick skin so that I could be resilient to those comments that were made and the names that I was called, and the part that really bothered me was the staring and the being pointed at and that feeling of isolation, of being the different person at school, but I had such great friends that were the complete opposite, and having that foundation of friends and people who loved me, teachers who were just phenomenal, that gave me the support I needed to get through it and become more resilient.
When you were talking about your friends and how they treated you, what were had they ever come back a little later on in life and been a little bit more reflective and said, "Wow, that you really went through a lot or went through a little, or you were just like anyone else." What is their reactions now that if you do talk to them as an adult?
I don't talk to my classmates from childhood
I don't
because I
either.
live in a different town that I grew up in, but there have been people who have messaged me on social media. They're like, "I remember when you were in class with me and you were just had the best penmanship. You'd write with your toes and I was always so inspired by you." And these are the things, of course, I didn't know, but they took some inspiration from knowing me when we were growing up and in school and the fact that they remembered me, because I mean, how many of us can say we remember our classmates from elementary school? It was is very humbling to know that it had an effect on their lives.
I think it's fantastic and not surprising that they remembered you. I also thought it was interesting how your mom gave you your advice, and she did the best she could at that time without like the internet to kind of do some message boards to ask others. As an adult, And if someone like you comes to you and with those same challenges, what would your advice be to people that may have limb loss and are getting stared at and possibly bullied?
Well, I have to really put myself back in that place. And of course, many parents come to me because I have a nonprofit now that serves children without arms, and they come to me for advice. And I always say, do something, help your child facilitate a self-confidence, self-esteem within, because that takes time for anyone to develop, no matter who you are. But once that self-confidence comes along, it's amazing how more resilient you are to those, uh, not so friendly encounters with children, bullies, anyone who's mean. So I think it's really about developing that self-worth, that self-esteem, self-confidence, and once and the way to do that is to really give children the opportunity to challenge themselves, to find their independence, to facilitate them through growth, and whether that's taking on a new challenge, like a new activity, and then and in the end accomplishing something and having the surge of confidence that comes from accomplishment, that helped me significantly because I did so much as a kid, and I had many opportunities to feel proud about my achievements.
What is the name of the nonprofit? I want to make sure we get that on the
It's called
podcast.
Right Footed Foundation International.
Fantastic. So anyone wants to find out more about that, I'm sure it's linked up at jessicacox.com or that you can look up that nonprofit individually. Because I've seen pictures again on your website where you're hugging other people just like you. I saw one on you two were on a wing of a plane, and I just thought, wow, how great to see someone like you that has accomplished so much. And I'm sure
That
that it,
picture, yeah. That picture of hugging a toddler who was also born without arms, it went viral and it was shared. It was literally a cell phone picture, and it was shared and it went totally viral on social media. I think it was like trending on Facebook at the time, and CBS Nightly News ended up sharing that picture and saying this is the viral picture that went out there to the world of a toddler without arms hugging the first armless pilot.
that's fantastic. Just out of curiosity, do you happen to keep in touch with that person, or is it just a like a fleeting
I
moment?
I definitely keep in touch with these kids who have become a part of my life. I think of them as my little
Sure.
sister, brother, and or, little kiddos that I look after as well. I'm not always in touch with them, but I do what I can, and when I am in their state, I will reach out to the parents and say, "How's it going? Let's connect."
Oh, that's fantastic. So as you get a little older, we all get a little older. We go from elementary school to junior high and certainly high school. Did some of those things change for you as far as the acceptance or the bullying or the staring? How did your life and your journey change as you grew older?
Well, I was very withdrawn in middle school, and people didn't know it because I just had all these walls up about
Hmm.
how insecure I felt, and, I mean, naturally, anyone experiences insecurity, but when you have something physically different about you, reasons to be even more isolated, it really, amplifies the sense of isolation, the sense of awkwardness, and the feeling of no one understands me, so I was a pretty shy individual in middle school and in high school, and then college was a time when I started to finally blossom and find who I am and my voice, and that I don't need to be so shy.
I find that very interesting. And certainly through that period, you also at some point turned 16, and there's usually two major life milestones when you turn 16, if you will. One is getting a driver's license, and the other one is possibly getting your first job when you're 16. Did you do both of those at 16? Did they come a little later in life? Where were some of the challenges, if any, around those two life milestones?
I went through those milestones. I mean, I was never, missing any milestone in my youth. I was fortunate to have such parents who really supported me through that. I mean, I rode a bicycle. It took a little bit longer, but I went through the milestone of learning how to ride a bike. I, drove a car after learning how to parallel park with my parents in the parking lot of some church, and just all these milestones were a part of my life. I was still having internal battles about my own confidence, though, and my own sense of self, so that was still a struggle and was a journey, but like the driver's license, I did fine learning how to drive and taking driver's ed in high school at a public high school. But when it came down to the test, I passed with flying colors, but then my license got suspended because someone witnessed me driving and didn't feel it was safe that I was driving without special modifications. I drive a standard automatic vehicle, and so she felt it was important to report to the motor vehicle division, totally unrelated to anyone at the motor vehicle division, but they had to, suspend my license at that point, and then I had to get my car modified, and then after the car was modified, I had to take another test to be able to regain my driver's license. So that wasn't standard for a typical teenager by any means, but, it
Wow.
really kind of helped me build that again, the resilience factor that you don't just get torn down, you kinda pick yourself back up and you just keep moving forward, and I was gonna need that for the rest of my life, so that life lesson ended up giving me, support for later on in life.
Was that when you were still 16? Did that happen fairly quickly?
Getting my
Except
license?
no, the reporting 16, 17, 18. Was it like when the first year you were driving, somebody reported
It
you?
was around the first year I was driving.
Wow. I didn't know that part of the story. I find that, well, I don't want to say my opinion on that one, but do you drive with modifications now, or is it just
No, I got my license back
good?
after showing them I could drive just fine with both modifications and without, so my license does not require that I have it.
Well, not only do you have your driver's license, you have your pilot's license. And I want to talk about that in just a second. But real quick, we're going to have a word from our newest sponsor. I'd like to welcome the newest sponsor to the We're Not Stumped podcast, and that's Discount Tire and America's Tire. And this one means a lot to me. I spent 30 years with that great organization. The first 5 years, I worked in the stores, changing tires and helping customers and actually representing the organization. And this comes from a person with limb loss. And we know within this community, within the limb loss, limb difference, and general disabled communities, sometimes the hardest thing we can do is get meaningful employment. Discount Tire gave me a chance. And after 5 years in the stores, I decided to re-educate myself. And that led to a 25-year career at their corporate office, where I ran at different times digital marketing, their e-business department, and their customer experience. The great thing about Discount Tire is you can save time very easily by buying and booking online. You say you don't know too much about tires? They have a tool for you. It's called Treadwell. Treadwell is a tool that makes the tire buying experience for the customer so much more authentic because it's based on actual real world test results. Mileage that their customers get on vehicles driving around their neighborhoods, blended with actual objective and subjective test driving data. Discount Tire has a great tagline: let's get you taken care of. And I can tell you from my personal experience, they mean everyone when they say let's get you taken care of, including those within the limb loss, limb difference, and general disabled communities. Discount Tire, thank you so much for being a sponsor and helping amplify the voices of those that are on the We're Not Stumped podcast. And to everyone out there that's listening, please go support our newest sponsor. So Jessica, you had mentioned prosthetics earlier, and you did wear them up until a part of your life. What was that journey for you, and what led you to some of your decisions about prosthetics?
I always have to preface what when I talk about my opinion about prosthetics with the fact that prosthetics have given hope to so many people and have restored lives around the world. Many veterans, many people who've lost arms, limbs due to disease or some kind of accident. But for me, they were as unnatural as if someone else without all their limbs were to grow another set of arms overnight. It was just so foreign to me to try to use these because I wasn't introduced to them until I was age 3. But by 3, I had already figured out my way in the world. It was gonna be through my toes and my feet. And that was as natural as it is for a toddler to use their fingers and hands. And so I just developed this natural capacity, this ability to adapt, and I did well. And my feet have served me all these years, incredibly so. And having prosthetics was like an unnecessary thing.
Yeah, I find that, first of all, there's a couple similarities we have. I think you were in eighth grade, is what I read, that when you decided maybe I'm done with prosthetics. It was about that time, eighth grade.
Yes.
Yeah, I was in eighth grade as well.
Oh.
And another parallel with us is I find I feel like I have to apologize for my own decision. And I'll tell you, I don't know whether we need to. I mean, I think the ability to make a choice is important. But I'm like you. I'll make sure I make that disclaimer. Hey, because I am 100% for prosthetics myself. In my personal journey, it's just not something I need any longer. But very important that they are available to those that need them for sure. So as you continued to grow, you went to college, and what was college life like? I didn't have that written down as a question, but what was that like for you?
College was the best part of, that young adult life. I think it was just so incredible to be free, to be, finding yourself, to celebrate your difference because uniqueness in college was, um, what was wonderful, it set you apart, and you have a chance to share your voice. It was really a special time for me, and I would go back in a heartbeat, but time in life is over, and it really gave me that opportunity to open up and to blossom.
Yeah, and during your whole life, and certainly, like a black belt takes years to get, and you have your black belt, you have your driver's license. So were these things that you were continuing to work towards during college? Did you get your black belt earlier in life? When did that happen for you?
So I started Taekwondo when I was 10, and it became a good way for me to channel some of my anger and frustration of being different. I could kick because Taekwondo focuses on kicks as opposed to hand movements. There's a lot of emphasis of kicks. So it was perfectly a fitting martial art for me because I had strong legs and feet. And you kick your shoes off at the door. So I was barefoot, and everywhere in my life I wanted to be barefoot because my feet are my hands again. So being in the Taekwondo school was great because we were all barefoot. It was some way to boost my confidence as well because you earn these milestones along the way, white belt, yellow belt, green belt, blue belt, red belt, black belt. And those little milestones just build your confidence to the point of getting your black belt. And 4 years after starting Taekwondo, I got my black belt. And, I would always look down when I would do my different memorized moves and forms and such, and my taekwondo instructor would always tell me, look up," and it really helped bring my eye level up, and as a result, my confidence and being more aware of everything around me. So it really was a life-changing hobby for me. It ended up introducing me to my husband of now 12 years. He's a martial artist himself. He teaches martial arts, and him and I are both black belts in Taekwondo. So we met because of that. It's been a wonderful journey. It's a good way to express yourself. It's good for fitness and exercise and flexibility.
Wow. I didn't know all that story. That's fantastic. It's so great to meet. Patrick is your husband, and I've been talking with him as well. What a great guy. So, that's a great story. Now, to get to your pilot's license, I know that I had read and I'd seen you on Ellen. By the way, plug, she's been on Ellen. She's been on everything. She's, like you said, 29 countries, I think you said, speaking all over the world. Just a fantastic person. You had talked about looking up in the sky. I think you were in a playground and seeing an airplane and making a decision. That's your story. I'd love to hear how you decided to do this.
I was just deathly afraid of flying. And it was more of losing contact with the ground, which doesn't make sense why I always had this fantasy of flying. Um, but that was more of like a superhero as any kid would. But then in adulthood, there came this opportunity to go up in a two-seater airplane, a Cessna airplane. And it was this opportunity to really, for the first time in a small plane, I was terrified. I didn't like the feeling. I was on edge. It wasn't like therapeutic in any way, like some people find it therapeutic, but it wasn't. I was just tense and uncomfortable. But once I was up in the sky, I had this experience of putting my foot on the yoke of the airplane and feeling what it was like to fly that plane. And I was like, I want to do whatever it takes to become a pilot, to overcome my fear and my discomfort around flying, to show the world that that disability doesn't mean inability, to show the world that you can overcome your fears to do things that you would never imagine for yourself.
Show the world you have too. I mean, you've shown everyone exactly what you said. But you talked about getting a driver's license for a car and some of the challenges, I guess, lack of a better term. Were there any obstacles, challenges, things that needed to be adapted for you? I've seen a video of you going around making your inspections, and I'm just like, it's fantastic. So, what was that journey like?
Oh, just like anything, it took a lot of ways to adapt the method of pre-flighting a plane, landing the plane, which is the hardest part about flying.
Hmm.
Really just understanding how I could safely maneuver in the sky by myself, solo, as pilot in command of aircraft. And it was just like a reflection of my previous years. It was just a matter of finding your way and doing it safely and persevering and not giving up. And of course, um, convincing others that I am capable of doing it because that's part of the process. It's the only way you become a pilot is if you get certified to be a pilot. So it was all a long, arduous process to get to that point. But again, that resilience factor was something that was a part of my life since the beginning.
What was more difficult in your journey, learning the actual flying of a plane or convincing others you could fly the plane?
Oh, I still don't convince people that that
Yeah.
they're still not convinced
Yeah.
that I can fly a plane. I mean, that just makes me laugh a little because when I think about it, like, if you woulda asked me before I started this whole process, I would've been like, "Are you crazy? Flying a plane?" So I understand where they come from.
I get what you're saying. I guess at times people wonder how I do things, and I at least I have one hand and two arms, and I can see the perspective at times. But sometimes they need to see ours. We can
They
do these
do. I
things.
think people need to kinda shift their lens once in a while and understand that just because within their own life perhaps that doesn't seem possible, it doesn't mean it's not possible for others, and everyone lives life differently.
Yeah, and I think part of it too, and I want to get your opinion on this because I saw Ellen ask you a question about, and I saw her have difficulty asking the question, like, do you look at things as a two-handed person, then backing into your situation? And that's not how we look at things. How do you look at things when you're looking to do something? You look at it as Jessica Cox.
Exactly, I look at things through my lens of experience, my lens of understanding, and I don't even think when I'm using my toes that I'm using feet. I just think of just this is how I do things, and I and it translates to another person who sees me doing it as very different because they've never seen that before. But living life through my own lens, this is my normal. This is all I've ever known.
And I saw a video of you playing piano as well. Do you still play piano?
I did play piano kinda growing up, and there was always a piano in my house growing up because my dad's a musician,
Oh.
so I still play occasionally.
Yeah, I can't even play with what I have. I think that's really fun to watch. Again, go to jessicacox.com, see these videos, see her blog, and not only that, see her speaking. And I want to talk about there's a quote on your website that I want to read because I think it's so fantastic as we get to where you're currently at in your life and what you're doing because you're doing so many things and talk about you as a speaker. And here's what it says: Jessica's speeches focus on conquering uncertainty, becoming more agile, and creating change makers within your organization. From championing diversity, nurturing innovation, Jessica shares actionable insights and real-world examples to drive both personal and professional development. What does it mean to you to go out and speak and actually help corporations see things differently?
It is very rewarding for me. For one, people, see me and they think, "Wow, she does all that," and that's making a shift in their lens of what's possible, and my hope is, of course, to make that shift for themselves and what's possible in their own life. If she can do this, then kind of that understanding that there's a lot more that they're capable of. So starting on that kind of base level of possibility and the way in which challenges are tackled. And you can probably understand just as well that we figure things out and we find a way around it if we have to, from the way 99.9% of the world does it.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean it's wrong. It just means we're figuring it out in a different way. But we have to be able to do that. And that makes us more resilient. So when we do come across hurdles or challenges in the road, we're able to get around them instead of just panicking and saying, "Oh, it can't be done," and it's over.
Yeah, I like the way you said that too, looking at things differently. I'm not a basketball center. I'm not 7 feet tall, so I don't see their perspective, but they have to duck underneath a lot of doors. That's something I don't share, but we all get through those doors, including the 7 footer. So I love the way you say that. You've also, and I want to talk more about your speaking career, but your book, Disarm Your Limits, the flight formula to lift your success and propel you to the next horizon. That book's doing very well on Amazon. I'm going to share the link certainly and do that. What was it like to come out with a book? Because that's a challenge I would think in itself.
Having a book was something I wanted to do for 7 years before I finally sat down and did it because I think we all dwell on trying to make things perfect, and I was thinking, "Oh, that should be this title or this title, this title," but the more I was procrastinating because I needed it perfect, the less the world was gonna have access to it to,
Wow.
help them through their own challenges, and it's very much a self-help book. It's not just a biography. And so I finally sat down and we set out to do this challenge within a year we were done with the book. And it just had to get finished because it would never have been finished if we don't just finally just sit down and do it. And we got it out. It felt great. It aligned well with uh my profession. I've had now like 4 crates of these books that have been printed from the Midwest, and these are like 4,000 books each crate.
Wow.
Um, and we've gone through them. They've been in our garage, and we're down to the last book I gave out last week. So that this book has done really well, and it's now, of course, it has been available on Amazon.
So it's still in print then, you're saying?
It's still in print, yes.
Got to make sure. I wanted to make sure we had that because I'm going to be getting one. Hopefully you'll sign it for me, but we'll see. Because we're both in the same state and we weren't able to get together today, but we will in the future. I know that. So
Yes.
I may have already asked this question, but I want to ask it again, maybe frame it a little differently. Do you have any wisdom to share, really for anyone, whether it be parents who have people that are born a little different, or maybe some people that are going through their own journeys and suddenly find themselves a little different because of limb difference or limb loss? Any advice that you say that this is what really helps me or helps others that you have seen in your own life?
I think it's important to come from a position of gratitude and, instead of perhaps looking at what you lost or what's missing or all the things that you can compare yourself to someone else. But if you come from a position of being full and grateful and a place of completeness, wholeness, it will really shift you and the way you engage in life. And sometimes that's hard, especially when you come across a difficult challenge, but it makes a huge difference.
I like how you talked about little victories or even major victories too, just accomplishing things along the way. Because I think it adds to the confidence, as you said. I think I love the way you said that earlier too. Those little victories still, I'm sure you still go through those little victories in your own life,
Mhm.
down to the last book. As you look forward, let's say the next 5 years, 10 years, what are you looking forward to in your life? What are you looking to accomplish? Because I know you're far from done.
I know there's a lot ahead of me, and I'm always staying open to it because I like to stay open to possibilities, to opportunities, and there's just no telling. I think I'm gonna continue on as a speaker, really talking to thousands of people around the world because it's so powerful to use a voice and to use this blessing, which is, a little shocking to see someone without arms and to use it as a way to help change their lens of what's possible and for anyone and to create more inclusion and empathy for differences. So I think we'll continue to do that work, meaning we, my husband, and myself, because it's a team effort. And then we'll see what comes next. Right now, we're building a plane, so flying will continue to be a part of the picture.
Oh, I didn't know you're building a plane. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
Like,
awesome.
what is that like? I know nothing about building a plane.
Well, it's like really building is kinda like taking a kit project and building it up, but, when you're doing that with an actual physical airplane, it's incredible. I mean,
Oh,
it's hard to even imagine, but there's thousands of pieces that go into an airplane, and this is being built up in the East Coast so that we can modify this plane and make it a more functional airplane where we can hop around and fly to different places. Because what I've been flying for the past 15 years is not really practical. It's more of when you would just maybe fly around for a few. flights, but nothing that would take you really across country.
Yeah, nothing like coming from Tucson to the Chandler Airport where we both live, right? I mean, that maybe you can get there, but not
Yeah.
across the country. Oh, wow, how exciting. Keep us updated on that. That's a
Yeah, I
really
will.
great thing to hear. Jessica, thank you so much for being a guest on the We're Not Some podcast. Like I said, you were always someone that I'd heard of for quite a while and admired from afar. And for you to be on the podcast means a lot to me. And I wish you nothing but success as you move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. It was nice to be on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the We're Not Stumped podcast. I have an ask for everyone that got to this point of the podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe. The reason is simple. These stories need to be shared. It would help it to get out there to the people that really need to hear these stories.